The channel's thumbnail smiled at the world. A family in matching sweaters, 2 kids holding up hand-painted signs, a mother with a soft, practiced laugh. The comments poured in beneath each upload: praise, gratitude, and loyalty. The account grew faster than anyone predicted. Offer letters arrived from companies that sold toys and vitamins and calming tea. Magazine covers found them. The city came to know the family as the little engine of wholesome content. House painted in cheerful white, bikes leaning on the porch, laughter that sounded curated and comfortable. But real life doesn't obey thumbnails. Real life accumulates small wrongs until the line between normal and dangerous dissolves. It started with a knock. An early morning, desperate knock at a neighbor's door. The neighbor opened to find a child trembling and shaking, shirt stained, barefoot on a manicured walkway, eyes hollow like someone who had been taught to swallow fear. The child spoke in broken breaths about hunger and being left alone. The neighbor called the number that adults call when a scene contradicts the image: 911. By mid-morning, the driveway was full of uniforms and cameras from local stations. People streamed to the curb with phones, scanning the lawn for signs. A camera tripod was visible through a front window. The family's feed was already posting, not to comfort but to control the narrative, claiming a miscommunication, a minor medical scare. It sounded plausible to someone scrolling quickly. But for those who stopped long enough to look, the picture began to fray. The public loves to believe what it wants to believe. It also loves spectacle. The collision of those two things turned private violation into public obsession. Rachel had always been methodical. She arranged colors to soothe, crafted schedules like prayers, and measured every day with lists that read like small vows. The first videos had been intimate, the kind of domestic clips that invited viewers into the small rituals of mornings and pancakes and bedtime songs. The camera caught what it was asked to catch: neat rows of cereal boxes, the gentle tilt of a head, the child's voice reading along in a sing-song. It felt honest because so much of the world wanted to feel it as honest. The popularity arrived as the algorithm did, fast and then relentless. A single clip of a child reciting an affirmation went viral. In a week, 1,000 comments called it healing, inspirational, the parenting we need. Rachel's phone buzzed with collaboration offers and sponsorships. Her husband, Derek, answered them with an eagerness that made practical sense. Money opened doors, allowed them to quit jobs and build a polished corner of the internet where the family could become both product and identity. As income rose, so did a new language inside the home. Words like discipline and correction crept into videos framed as guidance. Rachel began to speak about firm love, the phrase a brand counselor suggested would translate well into workshops and ebooks. She began to offer techniques that read like doctrine: routines with strict penalties, rituals designed to demonstrate compliance, consequences framed as spiritual realignment. On camera, she described them as intentional boundaries. Off camera, they mutated into schedules of deprivation and isolation. People who followed for recipes and morning routines were not prepared to interrogate an influencer's parenting style. Fans, partly invested emotionally and monetarily, echoed encouragement. The algorithm, hungry for engagement, rewarded more content that pushed edges. Fingers typed praise about authenticity while the children in the frames practiced smiling over discomfort. At some point, the idea of a personal life and public persona blurred beyond repair. The family's hours bent to filming schedules, to edits, to the gentle lie that the camera only ever amplified their goodness. Derek handled technical logistics with a loyal patience. He read teleprompters in the recordings quiet and operated the camera when Rachel needed it. The house had been refashioned into a studio, the living room a set, the bedrooms simplified until the background held no history. The kids learned to frame their movements, to hit marks with a reflexive grace that came from repetition rather than play. The dynamics shifted. Punishments were introduced as teachable moments and posted as content that doubled as marketing for the brand. A day of withheld food was framed as fasting for gratitude. A week on a thin mattress in a spare room became learning accountability. The family spoke of these things with the vocabulary of improvement. Followers nodded along. Behind closed doors, however, the measures became cruel. A child who failed to perform gratitude was sometimes denied the small comforts others take for granted. The reasoning was rationalized, a moral architecture in which obedience equaled virtue. The children adapted. Fear taught them the scripts they would later recite under ring lights. The smiles became thinner. The laughter practiced at scheduled moments sounded like an act in a long-running play. Outside the house, sponsors negotiated new deals. Inside, the cost of content kept rising. The business model broadened. Routines became courses. Family systems advice turned into an online curriculum promising superior children and a peaceful household if only parents adhered to certain unyielding rules. Rachel's workshops, sold in tears, offered private coaching that cost thousands. Fans wrote letters describing transformation. In testimonial clips, adults spoke of newfound serenity and structure. The channel's fame renamed authority as virtue. Among the many fans was Jenna, a young woman whose admiration for Rachel had become a vocation. She moved into the family orbit as an assistant and then as a partner in projects. It suited them both. Rachel needed someone who could manage details and translate ideology into event programming. Jenna needed a mentor and a place to belong. Jenna's presence reinforced the impression of a growing movement, a community of parents striving for an ideal. Within the house, isolation increased. The children were removed from regular school schedules. There were retreats, rustic weekends with taught little slogans painted on wood, with lessons that read like catechisms about control and gratitude. Where the online content framed these as healing convenings, the reality was more punitive. The children's schedules were rearranged to compress contact with the outside world. Friends became an abstract concept, mentioned only with polite distance. The narrative of protection hardened into a fortress. Chloe, the eldest, kept more of the home's truth than the others. She had seen more footage, understood the editing choices, and watched how ordinary hurts were wrapped into lessons for camera consumption. Quietly, she began to archive things. Drafts not uploaded, drafts that showed a child tied for an hour, draft videos with sounds that did not match public captions, messages from helpers who had been told to look the other way. Her anguish made a decision inevitable. She reached out to a former teacher who had always been a cautious ally. The teacher, surprised and frightened, listened and then acted. The teacher covertly set up a way for Chloe to step away, to carry evidence, and to take with her a voice that could articulate what the rest of the family could not. Officialdom moved slowly but decisively when the layers of evidence aligned. Social workers called to verify education histories and visitation logs. The family gave rehearsed answers. It was a long lesson in how plausible explanations can obscure violent intent. For a while, the outside world accepted the narrative that the house was orderly and the children were thriving. But the house's private logic continued to erode. The punishments deepened, not merely through deprivation but through rituals intended to break will, hours of repetition, enforced apologies, sleep denied until contrition was achieved. The content consumed by millions offered applause and discomfort in equal measure, but the algorithm rewarded what caused reaction, outrage or awe. It amplified what kept the viewers watching, and so the household's internal mechanizations were sculpted by its public reception. Chloe's escape became a pivot. She left at night with a backpack, with screenshots pressed into a teacher's hands and with an urgency that made her choices irrevocable. She moved to a private address given by an adult who had agreed to shelter her. The teacher turned evidence into testimony, messages to the appropriate authorities, footage to investigators who began to parse old uploads with forensic curiosity. Investigation is a slow, deliberate kind of listening. It finds patterns. It sees repeats. In the quiet analysis of past content, hints began to gather like sediment, inconsistencies in timing, abrupt cuts that masked crying, props that suggested staged compliance. Investigators requested subpoenas. They moved quietly because leverage in public cases can damage children as much as protect them. Before officers had time for forced entries and arrests, desperation precipitated escape. One child fled the house in the first thin light of dawn. The child's small figure crossed manicured yards without shoes. The neighbor's porch light revealed mud-caked feet, tremor in the limbs, a voice small and urgent. The neighbor, an older woman who kept her schedule by the hour and whose life had been shaped by long years in caregiving, called for help immediately. From that point, everything accelerated. Sirens came. Statements were taken in the shade of the manicured lawn. Cameras bloomed on the curb. The family tried to move faster than law. A live stream attempted to reframe the morning as an incident, an overreaction. The audience began to fracture. Devotion refused to erode easily. For many, denial wrapped itself in protective righteousness. The arrests were filmed by cameras in and out of the yard. People recorded with their phones, their faces bright with a mix of horror and hunger for detail. In interrogation rooms, those involved told different tales. Some offered rote explanations: religion, correction, firm love. Others spoke with a brittle mania that could not be separated from genuine belief. The assistant, Jenna, had followed instruction and ideology too far. She spoke in ways that showed she had been converted to a thought system that sanctioned cruelty in the name of improvement. In the house's quiet rooms, officers discovered things that turned speculation into charges. Secluded spaces adapted for confinement, journals filled with repetitive lines, camera angles focused on sleeping areas. There was a camera fixed to a bed frame in one room, a notebook in which punishments were rationed and scheduled like inventory. It was the kind of evidence that rewrites the public record, turning hashtags into case numbers. The trial that followed was messy and relentless. Witnesses described the choreography behind so-called authentic moments. Families that had once felt uplifted now watched themselves branded as complicit by association. The legal process attempted to do what the algorithm could not: parse harm and apply consequence. Chloe testified with an intimacy that made the courtroom lean closer. She described a litany of small cruelties and the way they compounded, how the camera's presence had reshaped the family into a performance machine that demanded compliance and punished dissent. The footage of apologies and affirmations, once lauded, became evidence of coercion. Verdicts are complicated things. They consider intent, action, and will. Convictions landed. Sentences were meted out with the bluntness of law and the weight of public scrutiny. The families who had joined in the cheer for the channel had to reckon with how quickly admiration can blind. The families' uploads vanished from the site with legal speed. Sponsors disavowed association. Streaming platforms commissioned documentaries that asked the public to examine how media can both reveal and conceal. The documentary took its place in a small canon of works that tried to parse digital spectacle. In interviews, survivors spoke about the slippage between performance and violence and how an economy that rewards extreme authenticity can become a vicious, distorting mirror. The process of healing was slow and mundane. Therapy, new routines, relocation. A life rebuilt away from lights and tripods. The children learned to let silence exist without it being filmed. They learned that laughter could be spontaneous and unedited, that meals could be given without being rationed against a script. They lived under the invisible kindness of neighbors who had once been anonymous viewers. The case left a residue. It made creators inspect their methods, forced sponsors to weigh ethics against reach, and reminded viewers to ask questions rather than swallow polished affirmations whole. It did not remove the audience's appetite for emotional content. What it did was to mark a cautionary line. The camera is a tool that can be turned into a weapon when the people behind it equate followers with justification. The most enduring lesson was small and private. A child who had once been forced to apologize into a camera now learned to say, "I am safe." It was a sentence spoken in a modest kitchen that had no ring light and no thumbnail. It carried less clout than a viral clip but more truth. Sometimes survival is a quiet reclamation rather than a spectacle.